I guess what motivated you to get into the council in the first place? What were you trying to accomplish? What have you been able to accomplish? And what challenges lie ahead?
I'll start with challenges, just just because. I think one of the things that surprised me was very quickly after I was elected, people started um, associating me with conspiracy theories, government conspiracy theories that had been going on for decades that I couldn't have possibly been involved with. I had been elected for literally 10 minutes. And so, that is a real challenge as an elected person in the kind of the modern media world where there's a ton of skepticism around politics and public service. Um, that you start off with a deficit in trust, which is a challenge, and it's too bad, frankly, because I can't tell you how often I say to people, there is no difference between you and I, except that I made the decision to step forward and put my name on the ballot, filled out the paperwork with the state and local um, uh, gatekeepers, basically the county clerk here in Jefferson County, and that's the difference between you and I. So that's one challenge, and then I'll go on to say that of the 26 members of Metro Council, I think some are better than others. I think some are. We all have different backgrounds, we all have different approaches, and we all have different goals. But I will say all 26 of the people that I've worked with currently and I've worked with since I've been on Metro Council are here for one reason, and that's to make Metro Louisville a better place. I don't have any question in my mind about that. So we'll start there. As far as what made me get involved, I have been a public policy nerd my entire life. And so I've always considered uh, becoming a public servant is kind of in the back of my mind. And I finally had kind of got my private life to a place where I thought now's a pretty good time to step forward and see what I can do. So I had a really good idea just in terms of public policy, what my positions were on a lot of different issues. So I didn't have to get up to speed in that sense. I already had spent my entire life reading about, both national, state, and local issues, and felt, pretty confident of where I stood and what I was trying to accomplish. As far as at the local level at Metro Council, I certainly wanted to try to improve the infrastructure in District 9. We as a city have deferred maintenance on our, frankly, roads, sidewalks, signs, um, whatever, you name it, for a long time, and we have actually started to make some progress in catching up. I've certainly done a significant amount of investment in our sidewalk infrastructure in District 9, although you might not see it so much because we have so much work still to do. But we've invested both annual budget money in sidewalks and roads, but I've also invested hundreds of thousands of dollars of my discretionary spending in improving sidewalks and crosswalks, and we've added some rapid flashing beacons and some mid-block crossings and some things to try to make District 9 more pedestrian friendly and safer for our community. So I'm proud of that, but there's a lot of work still to do.
You mentioned that you had a a policy in mind. You described yourself as a policy nerd, and I appreciate that. I feel like I fall in the same category. Um, as someone comes into council who may not be up to speed, and I'm thinking of our four candidates who are applying for the job, basically, um, what would you recommend to them in terms of prioritizing their efforts? How should someone begin in the council?
Well, and I say this to everybody I speak to who has ever expressed interest to me about running for council. The most important advice I could give somebody in terms both to serve on council, but to be in public office is to be yourself. If you try to be someone who you are not,
Mhm.
your constituents will smell that more quickly than anything else. So what would I do to get myself up to speed? I would first of all focus on the things I know. What is, we all bring something different to council. All 26 of us have different experiences, different backgrounds, different expertise, different, all of that. And so you can't know everything about everything. And so what are your strengths? I would focus on those first. I mean, maybe that sounds strange, but I would focus on my strengths and say, here are the things that I know something about. And I would start finding out how I can lean into my strengths on Metro Council. What are the ways that I can provide leadership, I can provide expertise, and I can provide good policy discussion on those issues. I would start there, and then I would try to get a broader feel for some of the things that are not my strengths. Because, one of the things, while we can't be experts at everything, we do have to know a little bit about everything in order to have an opinion on how to vote and how to approach the budget and all of those things. So I would lean into my strengths first and then try to just do as best I could with things that I knew less about to try to get myself up to speed so I at least could be conversational.
I read your newsletters and I see the events that you have listed. How much of a time commitment is a position on the council? How much of your day is spent on council business?
District 9 is a unique place because prior to me serving in this seat, the last 3 council people served District 9 full time. They committed they didn't have another job. I have had another job the entire time. And so both because we're in the old urban services district, which means our infrastructure is much older, number one. It means that, frankly, we have a different type of constituent who has a little more faith in government and expects government to be a little bit more involved in their daily lives. So District 9 is a different animal than District 17, for example, which is, in the suburbs, has much newer infrastructure, and a lot of their constituents just don't approach government in the same way that District 9 does. So the answer to your question is, if you give it 60 hours a week, it'll take 80. It'll ask for 80. If you give it 40, it'll ask for 60. So it's however much time you can afford to put into it is how much time it'll ask for. And the beauty of council is that it is kind of what you make of it. I mean, we all are very different. And in order for me to do it the way I wanted to do it, it was all consuming, and I didn't do my other job very well, frankly, which is one of the reasons I ultimately decided to step away from it. But I have enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun to be involved in the process. Public policy is both interesting and important. That's the only thing I would say is if you don't think public policy is interesting and important, this is not the job for you.
The issues that you think will be coming up in the council in the near future and perhaps lie on the desk of your successor, the impact of the state legislature being one of those. Uh, what impact has the Kentucky State Legislature had on Metro operations? We've learned a lot about school board, and of course, this election now is nonpartisan as a result of legislative action. What is the relationship between the council or between you and state legislators?
So again, we all have different approaches. I have done to the best of my ability. I have tried to maintain good relationships with my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, and I have good relationships with the Republicans on Metro Council. I don't have relationships with Republicans in the state legislature, and so I rely on my relationships on Metro Council. And I basically anything that I want to run up the flagpole or have tested in the state legislature, I take it to my colleagues, Republican colleagues at Metro Council. I would say there aren't very many of us on the Democratic side who have those relationships that can do that. I think it's incredibly important if you can continue doing that, then you can shape the way our city operates going forward. Because in the current environment, with a supermajority in Frankfurt, there is very little we can do here at Metro Council that isn't under the threat of it being preempted by the state legislature. And so I'm working on something right now that I hope to get passed through the state legislature. We'll have to do some work here at council as well. But it looks very promising because I started with my colleagues here at Metro Council. They took it to their colleagues in the state legislature. They liked what we were trying to accomplish, and hopefully we can get that done. So it's a different world. And I'll be 100% honest with you. When I was elected to council a mere 3 years ago, a little bit, and certainly when I was running the whole year before that, I never thought my audience was anybody other than my constituents and the constituents of Jefferson County. I just never thought about it. And I realized very quickly afterwards that everyone in Frankfurt, particularly the supermajority caucus, is also my audience. And so we started talking about changing the land development code here in Jefferson County, which in my opinion is the most local of all issues, how we use our land and how we, how that functions. And the minute we started talking about making significant changes to our land development code, we basically were hit with a 1-year moratorium by the state government that made it so we could do nothing for at least 12 months. So I realized then that my audience was much broader than I thought it was.
Yeah. Looking in the opposite direction, you have several home rule cities within your district, St. Matthews being, I guess, the largest of them, but others like Belmead, Druid Hills, and places like that. What's the relationship? As a resident of St. Matthews, if I have an issue, if there's a pothole, I call St. Matthews.
Yeah.
What is your interaction with the St. Matthews government, and what sort of overlay does Metro 9 have with these small city governments?
I think without being intentional about it, there's very little relationship. I have been intentional about a couple of things, particularly with St. Matthews, because it's big. And so many of my constituents are both in St. Matthews and in District 9. I think it's been important that I have a consistent relationship with the mayor of St. Matthews, Mayor Tonini, and I've made sure to cultivate that relationship with him. But then I've also found 3 or 4 members of the St. Matthews Council to also cultivate relationships with. So that way, anything that comes up, and something will come up. Now, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, that I already have a relationship in place with those people to rely on, I don't have to start from scratch. And I think that's really important. Again, I think, we've done some work with Public Works in St. Matthews, where we've had some crossover tree issues and some other kind of issues, but we don't have a whole lot of kind of interaction other than the relationship building that I've talked about previously. And I did that primarily so if when the crap hit the fan, that again, already have those relationships built. But I think it's, interestingly enough, if you're not intentional about it as a council member, you almost wouldn't even know that those separate governments within District 9 exist. I made it a point when I first came into office to introduce myself to the leadership and said, if you ever have any questions, reach out. I've done a little bit of that with Mockingbird Gardens. They've reached out some. Cherokee Gardens has reached out some, although they're not a 6 city. But very few of, Richlawn and Belmead and Druid Hills. We've had some relationship, some conversation back and forth, but honestly, it's been less than I expected.
One question that has come up for me from a resident of Clifton Heights had to do with the redistricting, where your district, Clifton Heights, was separated from Metro 9. Do you see any changes in the composition of precincts in Metro 9?
Unless something significant changes, which would be additional development and density in the old urban services district. we're going to continue to see population growth in the eastern part of Jefferson County, and we're going to continue, as a result of that, to have to shift every district in Metro Louisville east to start accommodating the change in demographics. So I mean, it's a simple matter of math. I mean, the redistricting that has occurred in Metro Louisville over the last 30 years has it is not really what I would call gerrymandering. I mean, gerrymandering is when you shape districts to achieve the political result that you're looking for. In our case, because we've lost so much population in the West and so much of it has moved east, we simply, in order to have to balance out each district at about 30,000 people in each district, we've had to move all of those districts east. And again, unless something significant changes and we start building more density in West Louisville, downtown, and in parts of our old urban services district, which frankly is something that I've been very intent on trying to accomplish, because I think it's important that we do that. Unless that happens at a pretty significant scale, we're going to continue to see the creep of districts having to shift east to accommodate that population. There's no way around it. And so we're going to probably lose some precincts in, let's say, Irish Hill. We'll lose Irish Hill. We may start losing parts of Clifton. We try to do the best we can to try to keep neighborhoods together, so we wouldn't want to split up. And when I say we, I mean previously it was always done by a demographer at the University of Louisville. But in order, we try not to split up neighborhoods, but there's no way around the fact that we're going to start losing neighborhoods on the western edge of the district and picking up more in St. Matthews and farther out Shelbyville Road. There's no way around that.
One question, I said that was the last question, but I have one more. As I go through this, one of the things that concerns me is the composition of the precinct. When we're dividing precincts, there doesn't seem to be much effort to have that kind of continuity of neighborhood within the precinct. Now, maybe I'm in a kind of a strange area in that way, but in our case, for instance, in Brookfield Avenue, if you're on the south side, you're in precinct 195, which puts you in Metro 9. If you're on the other side of the street, you're in a different precinct. Oftentimes you're splitting up. It doesn't seem to make sense. And my question is there any involvement of the population of the precinct in the redefinition of their precinct? It seems to me, and I've talked with someone at the clerk's office about this, that they get together and split them up, and it's all very top down. It makes more sense, in my opinion, to have a neighborhood that makes sense to the people in that neighborhood, kind of like a neighborhood watch, that you want those folks to be close to each other. In some cases, we have people that, nothing against them, but they're in a different area. We don't run into them often. So is there any involvement of local citizens in the composition of the precinct?
No. I mean, very little. And I'll tell you, Michael, I tend to be somebody who I'm less of a small D democracy person than a lot of my colleagues are. And what I mean by that is leadership to me is, if I get elected into office, I take the information I have, I do the best I can with it, and then I go back to my voters, or I'm constantly telling my voters why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that communication and that explanation of why I make the decisions I make is my pitch to them for keeping the job or not. And if they decide after 4 years that they don't think I have represented them very well, then they vote me out of office. A different way of doing that would be, and a lot of my colleagues have, an advisory council where they have, members of their constituency come and meet with them and help them make decisions about every issue. And to me, that to me is not the approach I've ever wanted to take. Because of the situation I'm in, because of the position I'm in, I have access to more information. I make the decisions and sell it to my people. If they don't agree with me, they vote me out. In this sense, it's not that I think it's a bad idea to have citizens involved in creating precincts. What I can tell you, having seen it, is it is extraordinarily complicated. And so if you have too many cooks in that kitchen trying to figure out what your precincts look like, I can't imagine you'd ever come to any conclusions. And so my guess is that having the problem and handing it to a U of L demographer, which is not the case anymore. That demographer has actually passed away and he doesn't do that job anymore. But the reason they handed it to that one person is because it's a really complex problem that where no one is going to be happy. And so it's a very difficult thing to have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And I will tell you, the people who make these decisions at council are savants. I mean, in the sense that they know every street in every precinct. They can tell you, that house on one side of the street's in this precinct, although it used to be in a different precinct. It's incredible the knowledge they have of it. Right. And so while I don't disagree that it would be helpful to have people participate, I just don't think it's doable. I think it's too complicated of a process, and you would just never come to any conclusions. Could I be wrong? I've been wrong before, Mike.
Well, I'll make that the last question, Andrew. And I hope after you leave office that I'll have a way to stay in continued contact with you, and maybe we can flush this out. I have some ideas that I'd like to share with you on that account, but I won't get into the minutia of all of it right now. Okay. I really appreciate you taking time, and thank you for all the work you've done on council. This is not the end of your term, so don't quit working yet. But you mentioned something about a council. What I want to offer to whoever your successor is a lending hand. Okay, I'm happy to do some work, and I don't have a lot of money to donate to candidates, but I do have some time and a little bit of talent, and I would like to offer that up to folks, whether it's in an advisory way or just in a grunt work way, whatever that might be.
Like I just said, you may have somebody who, immediately steps into office and says, I want as many advisors as I can. I want to put together an advisory council. That's not my MO, but the next person may be that person exactly. That's not to say, though, that we don't all need advisors and we don't all need people to lean on. And so I would offer up your services in either case.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.